Good afternoon, dear delegates. May I have your attention, please? Now, let's start our afternoon meeting. Before lunch, we adopted until para 4 of this draft decision 12.7. Over the lunch break, the Secretariat worked to revise Annex 1. This reflects the committee's consensus to create 3 new extra budgetary fixed-term posts. This is the version that you now see on the screen. I give the floor to Mr. Curtis to present the revised Annex 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. And first, I would like to thank the committee and the committee members for acknowledging the critical situation we're facing in terms of human resources, and particularly in relation to the implementation of the international assistance. So as the Chair has explained, Decision 4 has been adopted, but Decision 4 refers to Annex 1, where the details of the budget are. So we are proposing a revised Annex 1. So we will ask you to adopt the revised Annex 1, and you will see how the revised Annex 1 now contains 3 posts in the budget. So, and I remind you that budget lines 1 and 2 are the underutilized budget lines, so that 1 now represents 52.55% of the overall fund. Budget line 1.1 represents 8.2% of the overall fund, and budget line 2 represents 4% of the overall fund, and all other budget lines remain as they were in your proposal. So you are being asked to now adopt the annex, which includes 3 posts, a P3, a P2, and a G5, as was discussed. So you have to ask if there are any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Dear committee members, do you have any comments on the revised annex as presented just ago by the Secretariat?
Guatemala.
I recognize the permanent delegate of Guatemala. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just would like to ask to the Secretariat if we have seen that according to this modification, now lines number 1, 1.1, and 2 have been modified. My question is, was it possible as well to do these adjustments with the other numbers between 3 and 8? Just to clarify why those two. Thank you.
Sure, I understand. Quite simply because these are the lines where the money is not being used. These are the lines, budget line 2 we saw, only 9% of budget line 2 was used in the last biennium, and I can't remember the exact percentage which I quoted, which is the international assistance. So because these are the heavily underutilized budget lines where we keep having money. The other budget lines are being fully used. So this is why we chose those 2 budget lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are there any comments or any questions? I see none. May I now ask the committee to adopt the revised annex as amended and as shown on the screens? No comments, no objections, so adopted. Now let's go back to draft decision 12.com para 5. Can we see on screens? Para 5, taking note of the need to enhance the resources of the Secretariat to tackle the currently underused mechanisms of international assistance and welcoming the proposal for the creation of now 3 new extra budgetary fixed-term posts. Are there any objections? Adopted. Para 6, proposing to continue with the current practices of delegating to our Bureau the approval of those expenditures that are proposed by the Secretariat within the scope of the other functions of the committees as defined by the Convention. Are there any objections? I see none. So adopted. Para 7, again proposing to continue with the practice that was already applied within the current spending plan for other functions of the committee of allowing a margin of flexibility between activities. Do I see any objections? I see none. Adopted. New paragraph 8. This was one of the additional paras mentioned by the Secretariat yesterday, and the text was sent to committee members last night. This para authorizes a margin of flexibility between lines 4, 5, and 6. Do I see any objections? None. Adopted. And finally, last para 9, to modify Rule 5.5 of the Rules of Procedure of our committee, changing the deadline for state parties to send their request for assistance to participate in Bureau and the committee from 4 to 8 weeks. This is the other para that the Secretariat wished to introduce as a new para. Once again, the text was sent to the committee members last night. Are there any objections? I recognize the permanent delegate of Guatemala.
No objection, Mr. President. Just would like to know from the Secretariat the reasons that motivated the reduction of this period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Yes, I'll explain a little bit what we explained yesterday. The current operational directives require 4 weeks notification in order at the deadline of 4 weeks before the committee for participating countries. However, since the rules of UNESCO established by the General Conference, the administrative rules of UNESCO require that tickets be purchased at least 3 weeks prior to their departure. So there's already a tension between this rule and the rule of UNESCO because simply we cannot process the amount of requests. We're getting more and more requests, and we are expected to buy the tickets 3 weeks before the departure, so it doesn't work. So what has been happening since 2014 is we have been setting a deadline and effectively applying by letter a deadline because it's simply impossible to operate with this deadline. So what we are trying to do is, instead of having some confusion between what we send in the letter and what the rules of procedure say, we are trying to harmonize them. The reality is we cannot process the volume of requests we have in time to meet our administrative rules. So this is why we are trying to align what has actually been practiced since 2014 to what is in the rules of procedure which were established before. And again, this is this is because we are getting more and more requests as there are more and more member states. So that is the reason why. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are there any interventions? I see none. So, new para 9 was adopted. We have now adopted each of the para, and we need to adopt the decision as a whole. I think there will be no objection. Are there any comments, objections? None. I therefore declare decision 12.7 adopted as amended. Yeah, Secretary, ask just for technical announcement. Now, Secretary.
I would just like to inform participants that from now on, and thanks again to the generous contribution of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Arabic interpretation is now available. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on now to... Okay, I now give the floor to Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. Et avant de continuer mon propos, أود أن أشكر المملكة العربية السعودية على تقديمها المساعدة المالية كي تكون اللغة العربية حاضرة هنا معنا في هذا الاجتماع. Maintenant, je souhaiterais faire un commentaire sur la décision que nous venons d'adopter, Monsieur le Président, concernant le rôle du bureau. Vous n'êtes pas sans savoir que nous avons adopté, lors de la dernière conférence générale, une décision sur la gouvernance et sur le rôle qui est prédéfini pour le bureau dans cette organisation. Et nous souhaiterions qu'on ait à l'esprit une réflexion sur comment adopter les recommandations de ce groupe de gouvernance pour une application concrète au bureau de la Convention, notamment en ce qui concerne les règles de transparence, la diffusion des minutes du bureau, etc. Donc c'est un commentaire d'ordre général que nous souhaitions faire et pour plus tard, parce que nous, dans un autre point, nous proposerons un amendement qui va dans ce sens. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Okay, thank you, Algeria. Yeah. We will talk about this very important issue at a later stage. Turkey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I just wanted to support what has been just said by Algeria. This is an important issue that has to be reflected in our work because as Vice Chair of Group 1, we try to be as transparent as possible, trying to be in consultation with our both committee and the entire Group 1 members. So I think it will be important to keep this practice in the future within this convention and committee. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Turkey. And any other comments? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I now invite the delegation of Cuba to take the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est justement pour soutenir les commentaires du collègue de l'Algérie. Comme vous connaissez, on vient de travailler pendant 2 années sur toutes ces questions et les questions du bureau, c'est bien sensible pour tout le monde afin d'harmoniser les méthodes de travail, d'éviter et supplanter les questions qui concernent au comité ou aux organes de suivre et des conventions. Et ça sera une question très importante qu'on doit réfléchir bien pour que ces comités et ces conventions avancent de la même façon qu'avance l'UNESCO d'une façon générale sur ces questions de gouvernance. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, I think it's quite relevant, very important issues, how to promote democracy and openness and inclusiveness. And we have achieved a lot of progress during our governance working group in the framework of our general conference and also within the framework of EXB. So I think we achieved a lot. For example, one of the vice chairs, they are playing some bridging role, not just limited to our convention, for the EXB and WHC, and they are playing some bridging role between conventions and the EXBs with the regional groups. So I think we have achieved a lot, and from now on, based upon what we have achieved, we have to make every effort to further improve this very transparent working method. So I totally agree your interventions and your very constructive proposals. So having said this, I'd like to move on to item 9, draft overall research framework for the convention. Let me remind you that this item originates from the evaluation of the standard setting work of UNESCO's culture sector conducted by the UNESCO's Internal Oversight Service, IOS, in 2013. According to IOS, it is difficult to understand the progress made with regard to the implementation of the convention if objectives, indicators, and benchmarks are not clearly defined. The committee at its 8th session therefore decided to develop an overall research framework for the convention. From the beginning, the committee emphasized the necessity for an inclusive process of consultation and discussion in the development of such a framework, and asked for an open-ended working group to discuss it. Last year, the committee was able to acknowledge the outcomes of a preliminary meeting of experts generously hosted in Beijing by the National Commission of the People's Republic of China for UNESCO, and took note of the research map that the experts had produced. At the current session, the committee will make another step forward in the development of the framework as we will discover the research of the open-ended intergovernmental working group that was organized in June this year in Chengdu, thanks to the generous contribution by the Ministry of Culture of People's Republic of China and the Center for Safeguarding Intangible Cultural Heritage in Chengdu. This meeting represented a fundamental step in the process of consultation and dialogue between state parties to achieve the ultimate goal of adopting the framework. We are graced with the presence of His Excellency Ambassador Xuexian Wang, chairperson of the open-ended intergovernmental working group. As you may recall from the onset of the 2003 convention, Ambassador Wang played a key role in its development as chairperson of the first extraordinary session of the Intergovernmental Committee in Chengdu, China in May 2007, and again as a key actor in 2013 Again, in Chengdu, during the International Conference on Intangible Cultural Heritage in celebration of the 10th anniversary of 2003 Convention, I am honored to give him the floor so that he can illustrate the main achievements of the working group. Excellency Ambassador Wang, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ambassador Lee. Excellencies, dear participants. At the very outset, I wish to thank the Chair for inviting me to this session of the Intergovernmental Committee meeting to present a brief report on the result of the working group held in Chengdu. I'm sure that this session of the committee's meeting, under the able chairship of yourself, the results would be as beautiful as that of Jeju Island. But with your permission, Excellency, I wish to say a few words at the beginning, which are not included in my report. You mentioned the Chengdu meeting 10 years ago. I dare to boast that at that time, I look a bit younger and also a bit better looking than I was today. But unfortunately, these 10 years have left mercilessly their mark on my face and took most of the hair from my head. By this, I meant to say that time waits for nobody, no organization. We should seize the day and the hour to do whatever we can to ensure a better safeguarding of ICH, which to me is an integral part of the life and an integral part of the soul of mankind. With that, now I return back to the report. 53 member states, 3 Category 2 centers, and 8 accredited NGO organizations were present in Chengdu for the working group meeting. These figures themselves show that all stakeholders concerning ICH are dedicated to work out a framework. Although the task assigned to us by your committee was not an easy one and required a lot of joint efforts and also concentration due to the complexity of the results framework. But I found that the atmosphere in Chengdu, in our working group, was very positive, harmonious, and the participants intervened always in a very constructive way. So the initiative to work out a framework was welcomed with enthusiasm. And the final consensus, I have to say, was reached quite easily, which we have not expected from the very beginning. And thanks to the joint efforts of every participant, especially those from the state parties. The working group's discussion was built, or the chair mentioned, upon the results map that had been proposed by the 2016 expert group and which was welcomed by the committee last year. In Chengdu, our working group examined the draft set of core indicators one by one, and also the associated assessment factors prepared by the Secretariat, with an aim to permit effective measurement of the outputs, outcomes, and the impacts already identified in the results map. In most of the cases, working group members were able to agree on the wording of specific indicators or factors. In some other cases, they called for further revision or rewording of the components. A group of 6 rapporteurs were elected, one for each UNESCO electoral group. And they were elected to support the editing of the draft framework and also to review the debates. I have to say, they have been working very, very hard. And every night, they have to work late into the night together with the Secretariat. And I admire their dedication. And I recognize some of the faces present today. So the rapporteurs are, first you must excuse for my pronunciation of your beautiful names. Anything wrong is my responsibility. They are Ms. Gabriel Detman, Austria. Ms. Alla Stashkevich, Belarus. Mr. Andres Ferrero, Colombia. Mr. Song Mi Bak, Republic of Korea. Mr. Abdul Aziz Gise, Senegal. And Mr. Hani Hayane, Jordan. As I said, they have been really working very hard. I'm very grateful for their outstanding contribution to the final result of the report, of the text. And the text was well prepared, and that was adopted by the working group unanimously during its final session, and which were in front of you today. At this stage, I will only underline that the number of core indicators remained at 26. There's no change on the number of indicators. Although the order may have changed somewhat, but not the content. And the number of assessment factors increased slightly to 86. That's quite a big number, but to 86. I'm sure that Ms. Curtis will shortly provide you with more information on the details on the framework and also the task in front of you today. I'm also pleased to highlight that the overall results framework was adopted, as I said, unanimously and enthusiastically by the working group and recommended to the committee on your committee for adoption. I assume you can adopt it in 5 minutes. The working group meeting was also an important occasion for the participants to discuss the possible impacts and linkages with the periodic reporting mechanism under the 203 Convention. There was a consensus that benefits could be obtained or attained through moving to a regional cycle for national reporting. That could provide opportunities for international cooperation, knowledge sharing, and technical assistance, including capacity building. The working group also deliberated on the potential of mobilizing complementary sources of information and how they might be used for assessing the impact of the Convention. In this regard, it was suggested to continue exploring the possibility of using other sources of information for assessing the impact of the Convention beyond periodical reports, and the potential synergies with the reporting mechanisms outside the 203 Convention. In particular, the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030. Mr. Chair, I personally think that the establishment of the overall results framework is an ambitious and visionary undertaking that is rare in international normative instruments. I hope that our work in Chengdu would provide a solid basis for your decision today, which is crucial for guaranteeing a successful future of our cherished convention. But finally, I wish to pay my gratitude to Mr. Curtis and his team for their professionalism, their dedication, and outstanding contribution to the work of my group. And I also wish to thank my government and the UNESCO for their trust in me and for their daring to take the risk to nominate me as chair of the group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Wang, for your inspiring presentation. I am sure that the information that you provided will guide us today in our debate on the overall discussion. Before starting our discussion, I'd like to ask the Secretary to present the document we have in front of us, and in particular, to provide the committee with some details about the draft framework presented in Annex 2, together with the way forward. Mr. Curtis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and please allow me before starting to also thank Ambassador Wang for his hard work and his skilled chairing of a technically complex meeting which we held in Chengdu. I think I'm pronouncing better. Indeed, what we are trying to do is new, innovative, and rather ambitious. Specific challenges arise from developing an overall results framework for an international normative instrument such as our convention, which is quite atypical of the kind of programs on which monitoring and evaluation work typically focuses. The convention involves many actors, many potential causes, and just as many possible effects. But the overall vision is already determined by its basic texts. So these have always kept in mind when including such a framework. The graphic presentation of the framework that you will find in Annex 2 of document ITH/17/12.com/9 was inspired from the framework which was adopted in the 2005 convention for its 2015 global report. So the visual framework is based on that. And if you please look at Table 1 in Annex 2 of the working document, the top 4 rows are the impacts and outcomes proposed by the expert group in Beijing, and which were welcomed by the committee at its 11th session last year in Addis Ababa. We've reformatted the information here with impacts at the top rather than the bottom, followed by long-term, mid-term, and short-term outcomes. The next row identifies 8 thematic areas that seek to group the core indicators in a logical way. Assignment of an indicator to a particular area is not intended to imply that it refers exclusively to that single thematic area. Certain indicators may well have a foot in two different areas, and other configurations might have been possible. But it is a way of ordering the thinking and the indicators that came below. Finally, Table 1 offers abbreviated statements of the 26 core indicators, and it should be noted that the authoritative statements of the core indicators are to be found in Table 2. So if we study a little Table 2, where each indicator is accompanied by 2 to 5 assessment factors against which the indicator is to be assessed. I remind you that indicators are defined as a qualitative or quantitative means of measuring an output or outcome with the intention of gauging the performance of a program or investment. For indicators to function most effectively, they must be measurable, and all actors involved in monitoring, reporting, and evaluation should share a consensus about what to measure and how to measure it. The core indicators are generally formulated in terms of extent to which a given situation exists or some change has been achieved. It is not accidental that they do not say extent to which states parties have done X or implemented Y, since there are often a larger number of actors contributing to the results. Therefore, it is essential that the assessment factors include both those initiatives that arise within the communities or groups themselves and those interventions that come from outside of the communities or groups, including those that originate with the state. For each core indicator, the draft framework presents 2 or more assessment factors against which that indicator is to be assessed. Each state monitors and reports on the existence or absence of these factors within its territory. In most cases, these factors and their terminology are drawn directly from the various provisions of the Convention and its operational directives, in which state parties are obliged or encouraged to ensure that specific conditions are met, either through their own actions or by facilitating the actions of others. Core indicators and assessment factors are closely focused on the kind of information that states parties will regularly provide in their periodic reports. The principal source of information for the overall results framework will therefore be the periodic reports that will provide sufficient information to determine whether each of the core indicators is achieved. And that is with the exceptions of indicators 23 and 26, which are to be monitored at the global level, drawing upon information already being gathered by the Secretariat. So again, the idea is not to create, and we heard very well last year, parallel reporting systems or extra reporting systems, but to align the periodic reporting with the overall results framework so that through the periodic reporting we are able to understand the impact of the Convention. And of course, not every indicator will necessarily have the same relevance for each country. States will indeed report and monitor on the existence or absence of the correspondent assessment factors within their territory. Because each indicator has 2 or more associated factors against which it will be assessed, it will be possible to report that within a given state party, an indicator is fully or partially satisfied. The results framework will not, as I've just said, impose new reporting obligations. And synergies with other reporting mechanisms, such as those for the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030, will be considered also for assessing the impact of the Convention. For the way forward, the Secretariat will therefore elaborate guidance notes for all the 26 core indicators similar to the sample guidance notes included in Annex 3. And these should be a useful tool for the overall results framework to be implemented effectively. Thanks to them, all those involved in monitoring, reporting, and evaluation should share a consensus about the scope of each indicator and a common understanding of how to measure the degree to which it has been attained. Additional work remains to define baselines and targets for each indicator, both at the global level and the country level. The working group agreed with the Secretariat's suggestion that it will be prudent to approach the problem of baselines and targets at a later stage once states parties have reached general agreement on the draft framework. For the time being, it suffices to clarify that both targets and baselines need to be realistic to be effective. They must be based on actual experience, and in the case of targets, they must be attainable. Targets should not be so easy that they will always be met, but neither should they be so ambitious that achievements will always fall short. Country-level baselines and targets will be established by each state party according to its own situation, capacities, and priorities. The global ones would be established through an international consultative process. The adoption of the overall results framework will have an impact also on the periodic reporting system, as I mentioned. Possible improvements will be discussed in the next item on the agenda, item 10, in particular the shift to a regional cycle of national reporting. Without going into any details now, I would like to mention that a revised results-oriented ICH 10 periodic reporting form is envisaged, as well as informational materials and capacity-building activities for rolling out the results framework and the new reporting system. Let me recall once again that periodic reporting should not only be about compliance with reporting obligations. It has to be meaningful and useful for states themselves, and should be considered as a unique opportunity for states to take stock of the achievements and challenges that still remain for an effective implementation of the Convention. If the committee wishes to examine the results framework in Annex 2, I would suggest to consider the two tables presented earlier in inverse order as the working group did. First, adopting the exact language of the core indicators in Table 1 before turning to the abbreviated statements in the exact language in Table 2 before turning to the abbreviated statements in Table 1. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for this thorough presentation. I am sure that committee members are eager to jump in on your presentation and that of Ambassador Wang. So without further ado, I open the floor. Does anybody wish to kick off? I recognize the distinguished representative of Senegal first. You have the floor, sir.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'ai eu le privilège de prendre part à ce groupe de travail et d'être parmi les rapporteurs de ce groupe de travail. À ce titre, vous me permettrez de rendre un hommage vibrant à son Excellence, M. Wang, par sa sagesse, mais aussi par son sens des relations humaines, par sa pédagogie. Il a su jouer un rôle extrêmement important en présidant ces travaux. Par moments, c'était difficile, mais il a su à chaque fois être là, à la place qu'il faut, pour ramener les débats dans un esprit parfaitement harmonieux. C'était agréable de travailler avec son Excellence et nous avons beaucoup appris et je pense vraiment qu'il faut lui rendre un hommage particulier. Si nous avons réussi à faire ce travail, c'est grâce vraiment à sa pédagogie et à sa sagesse. Merci, Excellence. Je voudrais dire ensuite que ce travail qui a été produit, c'est un travail long, inclusif, participatif, où vraiment les experts des différents horizons, les ONG, tout le monde a pu participer à l'élaboration, à la reformulation, si vous voulez, de tout ce que nous avons hérité déjà du premier groupe de travail de 2016 et ce que nous avons fait en 2017. Je souhaite que le comité ici présent puisse apprécier ce travail et aller dans le sens de son adoption. Il y a des choses extrêmement importantes qui ont été décidées, qui ont été proposées, et notamment le cycle des rapports périodiques. Il y a beaucoup de choses. Même hier, on a parlé d'indicateurs. Vous savez, on a quand même eu beaucoup de problèmes dans la culture en ce qui concerne les indicateurs. Aujourd'hui, il ne s'agit pas peut-être de vendre la culture, de la commercialiser, comme disait hier l'ambassadeur de Cuba, mais nous avons quand même à proposer, dans le cadre de l'économie de la culture, dans le cadre de l'agenda 2030, il y a des facteurs à mettre en valeur dans la culture. Il y a peut-être ce que nous appelons en Afrique les aspects sacrés et les aspects profanes. Mais vous savez que la gastronomie, si je prends que cet exemple, est un élément essentiel de nos cultures. Mais la gastronomie, il faut peut-être la vendre. Et si nous voulons la vendre, et si nous voulons vendre quelques produits de la culture, il nous faut avoir des indicateurs probants. Et ça, nous avons travaillé à Beijing grâce vraiment à l'UNESCO. Et nous terminons notre intervention en félicitant également le secrétariat. Vraiment un professionnalisme exceptionnel. Nous avons travaillé quelquefois jusqu'à des heures impossibles, mais c'est parce que également le secrétariat était là. Et à chaque fois que les gens voulaient arrêter, on est allé plus loin. Et vraiment, c'est un travail sur lequel moi, je suis sorti de Beijing complètement, voilà, ravi de ce que j'ai vécu là-bas. Et je pense que c'est des expériences absolument originales. Merci à tous.
Thank you, Senegal. On my list, Colombia, Philippines, Turkey, Austria. I now give the floor to Colombia.
The delegation of Colombia commends the Secretariat and the participants of the working group for the elaboration of an extensive and comprehensive set of indicators and assessment factors with which to measure the overall result of the implementation of the 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of ICH. The delegation of Colombia would also like to extend its gratitude towards the People's Republic of China, whose generosity allowed to the development of this working group and thus generating a cooperative effort in the construction of this overall results framework. We would also like to thank especially Mr. Wang for his wisdom and helping us to work on this subject. We would like to emphasize the importance of one of the recommendations of the working group, which is to work towards the exploration of synergies with other reporting mechanisms outside the Convention. We believe that we must strive towards positioning ICH as a fundamental factor in generating new ways of understanding human well-being and providing a guide towards the protection of a diverse, creative, and rich future at the global, national, and local levels. In other words, it is important to continue work within the framework of the Convention, but understanding that safeguarding ICH plays a larger role of communities and groups in the strengthening of their capacities of resiliency in the present context. Therefore, we would like to present a possible amendment in paragraph 7 of draft decision, adding the following in the current text. Further request the Secretariat to elaborate providing targets, explore broadly potential synergies with reporting mechanisms outside the Convention. In particular, the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030, specifically the Goal 11 in regards to sustainable cities and communities, especially Target 11.4 that calls for strengthening the efforts to safeguard and protect the world heritage and natural cultural heritage. This will give a place to ITH within another important framework of sustainable development, which happens related to urban issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. I now invite your distinguished representative of Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We commend the Secretariat for the work on this initiative, which is based on an iOS recommendation, and of course, Ambassador Wang for his able leadership during the Chengdu meeting. Having an overall results framework is very useful to measure implementation of the Convention. In our view, the challenge should be in promoting the framework as a common point of reference for states, parties, and communities. Considering the complexity of the framework and the need for the Secretariat to prepare guidance notes, this shall also be an additional burden on top of the daily administrative workload of the Secretariat. Questions as to its implementation and measurement also arise. Will this framework be embedded in periodic reporting of states' parties? Conceptually, Would numerical indicators be able to fully capture the diversity of local and national situations, institutions, and capacities when it comes to ICH? There may be pitfalls in prescribing a common template when comparisons are intrinsically very difficult to achieve. Also, the level and nature of communities' involvement in such assessments, measuring the extent to which, quote unquote, certain policies or guidelines are being met, should be carefully considered before adopting the framework. While another concern is actually whether the overall results may result to some contractual obligations based on the convention. Well, states parties may need more time to fully understand the implications of the framework. In this regard, we recommend that the Secretariat convene an information meeting for all states parties before the General Assembly. Not all state parties were present, just like my delegation, nor aware of the working group held in Chengdu. We have submitted an amendment to the draft decision in this regard, which is also co-sponsored by other delegations. And if I may read my draft, the draft that we would like to be part of the draft decision is request the Secretariat to convene an information meeting in the first quarter of 2018 on the overall results framework and its practical implications for states parties. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Now, Turkey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We would like to thank the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group on developing an overall results framework and the support given by China to this end. And particularly, let me commend the chairperson of the open-ended group, Ambassador Wang, for his leadership in conducting a very fruitful discussion. Our experts were there, but personally I was able to understand the richness of the debate going through the summary records of the meeting. So it felt that everything was explored there. We believe that we are at a critical stage where this committee will be considering this framework. As a matter of fact, this work of the Convention has already been acknowledged as a best practice by the ad hoc working group on governance. It will be replicated by other conventions if we are able to carry this process forward in a successful manner. Basically, application of overall results framework is an ambitious undertaking, as this would be a new approach for states parties, as well as different actors involved in the process, which are diverse in nature. Support and guidance would be needed for the implementation of this new approach. Support would be necessary in the establishment of targets and baselines at the country level. As a result of application of results-based framework, periodic reporting format is planned to be revised to align it with the overall results framework. At a time when the rate of reporting to Secretariat is quite low under its current format, it would be even more challenging for state parties to report in a new format. State parties would be in need of support for their adaptation to this new periodic reporting as well. We would like to know how Secretariat is planning to implement it, considering the financial limitations of the Convention. And we will have some remarks when we come to the adoption of the decisions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Turkey. And now Austria.
The delegation of Austria welcomes the new overall results framework and would like to join the previous speakers in thanking the host country, China, and for hosting the meeting and for co-funding the open-ended intergovernmental working group in Chengdu. And we think it will help the monitoring of the implementation of the convention and focus on output, outcomes, and impact. The aim is to develop a clear and credible evidence-based vision for the future implementation of the Convention. The elements for this common vision include the concept of safeguarding, the involvement of communities, mutual appreciation and respect, as well as international cooperation. Looking at the results, we think that this framework will serve as a roadmap to implement and realize the full potential of the Convention, since it provides to be a highly relevant guide to make the Convention more effective. With the results framework, periodic reporting could indeed become a learning opportunity for state parties on national as well as on regional levels. We would therefore like to draw our attention to the proposed improvements to the periodic reporting system as addressed under the next item, item 10 in our agenda, which will hopefully enhance the quality, the usefulness, and particularly also the number of periodic reports. We would like to thank the Secretariat for the helpful guidance notes and welcome the elaboration of similar notes for all 26 core indicators. The remaining challenge we see is the definition of baselines and targets for each core indicator, considering that ICH involves a broad range of stakeholders in the implementation of the Convention. With the new framework and the new periodicity of the reporting system as proposed by the Secretariat, however, we are confident that the committee will have a much better overview how the Convention is developing in future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Austria. So for the time being, we have completed a kind of general debate on this item. Any other interventions? Okay, before moving to the decision, I'd like to invite either Secretariat or Ambassador Wang if they have something to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to address two of the questions I believe were addressed to the Secretariat, one from the Philippines and one from Turkey. From the Philippines, indeed, I think the questions you pose are exactly the questions we discussed in Chengdu. And these are complex questions. And we had 53 countries discussing them quite in depth over 3 days. And the results framework is the result of all of those discussions. We are sorry you were not able to participate, but I can assure you we sent letters to every single delegation. It was in the committee decision, so it is unfortunate, but this is precisely why we needed a 3-day intergovernmental process in order to come to these kinds of agreements because of the complexity of those exact questions you answered. I might invite you to look at the summary records, as was said, because you will see that many of those points were debated. And of course, the framework will never be perfect. It is a consensus that was achieved in Chengdu. But we would be very happy to give an information session before the General Assembly. There is no problem for those who are not able to participate so that they can be informed on those decisions. I think Turkey's point is also a very good question, and that is why, and it was also addressed during the 3 days we were there, and that is why it led to the proposal also to reform the periodic reporting. And you will see in the next item that we intend to address to suspend for a period periodic reporting while we revise the forms and develop capacity building materials. And if we move to this regional cycle, we will need extra budgetary money to do that, but we will hope to do capacity buildings as it happens. So those concerns have been discussed and thought about in Chengdu. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Hungary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My delegation also wishes to thank the People's Republic of China for its generous hosting and co-funding the Chengdu meeting. Unfortunately, our delegation was not able to attend, but we savored the richness of the debate from the summary record, and we also thank very warmly and commend the chairman for achieving this formidable result in such a short time. We feel the complexity of the issue, and we also share some of the concerns expressed. Nevertheless, we really
like to express our appreciation for the ambition of conceptual coherence that is present in this overall results framework, and the way it is foreseen that it will roll out in practical measures in terms of periodic reporting and actually the needed capacity building that should accompany the periodic reporting if this framework is applied. We also see that this will result in a complex periodic reporting system, but that will be one that is also meaningful. And we think that the conceptual clarity and coherence makes the reporting exercise meaningful, and then it is worth the effort and worth the energy put into it. So in this spirit, we also support the proposal of the Philippines to convene the information meeting in the next in the first quarter of 2018. And we look forward to the implementation of this overall results framework that goes to the very core of this convention. The Article 2 of the convention that defines, Article 1 of the convention that defines the purposes of the convention picks up the very same terms that are echoed in the overall results framework, that is safeguarding mutual respect, raising awareness at the local, national, and international levels of the importance of intangible cultural heritage, international cooperation and assistance, and of course, communities that should be present in the safeguarding measures and should be active agents in decisions affecting their ICH. We think that the overall results framework reflects that attitude and reflects these core principles of the convention. That's why, on the whole, we support it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Hungary. Any other comments or questions, interventions? I see none. Let's move now to the decision. Please refer to document ITH/17/12.com/9 and it's a draft decision in para 21. Can we see on screens? Yeah. May I ask the committee to adopt the draft decision 12.com/9 as shown on the screens, because there must be some proposed amendments. Let us proceed para by para. Para 1 is a procedural one. I see no objections. Para 2, recalling previous decisions. I see no objections. Adopted. Para 3, thanking China for having generously hosted and co-funded the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group. Are there any comments? Adopted. Para 4, to welcome the outcomes of the working group and thanks its members. No objections. Adopted. Para 5, to recommend to the GA to approve the overall result.
It's a new para 5.
New para 5? Mm-hmm.
It's a new paragraph amendment of the Philippines.
Yeah, it's a new para proposed by Philippines, Algeria, Hungary.
Can I say something on this paragraph? Can I intervene on this paragraph?
All right. Yeah, I'd like to ask the Secretary to intervene.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned earlier, we're very happy to provide an information session. I have some concerns with the term "the first quarter." Whether or not we'll be able to do it by the end of March, which is the first quarter of the year, I'm a little bit concerned in terms of logistics. As you know, we have a new Director General, we have many things going on, and we have a evaluation body. If we could be given a bit more flexibility in the timeline to ensure that we can do it before the General Assembly, say at least 4 weeks before the General Assembly. The first quarter may be difficult. So I would ask for the indulgence of the submitting states if they could allow us a little bit of flexibility on the time to make sure that we do this information session, of course, before the General Assembly, but we may find it difficult to do by the first quarter.
Okay, thank you, Secretary. Any other reactions from proposals? Yeah, I recognize the Ambassador of Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the proposal of the Secretariat, that will be about 4 weeks before the General Assembly, is acceptable to my delegation.
Okay, thank you, Philippines. Some adjustment of timing of information meeting, at least 4 weeks before next session of General Assembly. Are there any comments? Austria.
Thank you. This is just to align our delegation with the proposal by the Philippines, Algeria, and Hungary. We think it is an excellent idea to have an information meeting in order to make the most people familiar with this new draft framework, and which is very important, and also for its implication that the people identify with it and they get to know it before the General Assembly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Austria, also seconded by Austria, and now I give the floor to Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Likewise, we also want to support the amendments made by Philippines, Algeria, Hungary, and at Turkey, please. Thank you.
I recognize the delegation of Mongolia.
Thank you, Chair. We also support to convene the meeting before the General Assembly. It's of course we need to give some time framework for the Secretariat to work on it. So it would be better to convene the review before the General Assembly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mongolia. I think wide support from our committee members. So can I take it the committee will adopt the new para 5 as amended? Are there any objections? I see none. So new para 5 was adopted as amended. Para 6, to recommend to GA to approve the overall research framework. Any objections? Seeing none, is adopted. Para 7, to request the Secretariat to continue elaborating guidance notes and other informational materials. I recognize Turkey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, we have actually a question to the Secretary and also to the colleagues from the committee. Well, starting from 6 onwards, we think that there is an inconsistency with the paragraph that we have adopted just now in 5. In paragraph 5, we're saying that we're recommending to the General Assembly to approve the overall results framework. So it means that as the committee, we have not yet approved. We don't have that authority. So the authority belongs to the General Assembly, right? So, and when I look at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, do you think, as the committee, can we request such steps before approving overall results framework? Is it appropriate? Or should it be the General Assembly, maybe, to request such steps? That's my question. I think it would be better if we delete those paragraphs and ask the General Assembly to consider that, because otherwise we're going way over and prejudging the outcome of the General Assembly's recommendations. Huh? Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite relevant, and I think the Secretariat fully agrees with your point raised by your Turkish delegation. So I'd like to invite the Secretariat to respond.
Indeed, but before I respond, we did receive a written draft amendment to paragraph 7 as well, so we need to acknowledge that from Colombia. However, I think the point of Turkey is correct, and we didn't, because it's already been through an intergovernmental process. And if we start touching that intergovernmental process of 53 countries by this committee and then sending it back to the full General Assembly, there's a problem in procedure there in that sense. So we endorse Turkey's proposal. Thank you. So, however, we had a written, in order, because we had a mistake, we forgot to put up the written amendment to paragraph 7, which was submitted previously through ICH amendments by Colombia. So I just want to put that there because we made a mistake and we didn't have it on the file. Of course, that means should Turkey's proposal be done, then of course that amendment goes. Thank you.
Okay, it's Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to call the attention that we also mentioned when we had an intervention that we want to point on the goal 11, because we've seen during the committee you've been working on the goal number 4 of the Agenda 2030 and somehow the overall agenda, but and we know in the division of creativity you're working on the goal 11 for the different conventions, but we want to insist that it's important to remark that ICH has also to deal with this goal 11. So we would like to include it in this amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Again, Turkey has suggested we should remove the entire paragraph, the 2 paragraphs 7 and 8, because actually it was not included in Chengdu. So if we add it here in a smaller group, what was included was reference to reporting mechanisms outside of the conventions, in particular the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030. That was agreed in Chengdu, and indeed we hadn't put it here. But Goal 11 was not agreed in Chengdu. So if the committee now comes and adds to what was agreed by a larger number of member states, and then it goes to the General Assembly, there's a problem in procedure. So I think Turkey is right. It's actually not the committee's mandate to request at this stage, because it is for the General Assembly to approve, and therefore it is for the General Assembly to request this work of the Secretariat. And as you rightly mentioned, again, this is being addressed in the C5 of UNESCO. So we're dealing with an overall results framework. Your concern is addressed in the C5. It could go into. So it's just, it's not that we won't do it, but it is addressed in the C5. Thank you. Turkey wishes the floor.
Now it's time for Turkey to react.
Thank you very much. Let me thank the Secretariat for this explanation and endorsement of what we have proposed. But we have actually proposed to delete the rest, not only 7 and 8, because they are all interlinked. And I mean, for example, requesting the Secretariat to revise the form accordingly. The form ICH 10 will be a periodic reporting form which will be revised according to the overall results framework. So these are all interlinked and they are all related to the adopted version of the overall results framework. That's why it should be the General Assembly who requests these steps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Turkey. And Colombia, and followed by Philippines. First, Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, if it's about a procedure, for us it's okay to delete the paragraph. It's okay. We only matter that this subject is work within this overall framework for the convention, but it's okay.
Thank you, Colombia. Now, Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. We thank Turkey for the suggestion. We concur that the remaining paragraphs would be superfluous at this stage since the General Assembly needs to make the final decision. But we do take into account Colombia's useful suggestion. I think we should, note it, of course, in the records and for future implementation of this topic. But also to say that, the committee has a role also in, determining the overall results framework. And our discussions here should feed into the discussions at the General Assembly. And if any amendments need to be done to the overall results framework, actually, they should be taken because the committee probably is based on its mandate, is a higher body than the working group. And also we have to report to the General Assembly. So we shouldn't tie the hands also of the committee nor the General Assembly to amend, if necessary, the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Philippines. Now, Secretariat.
Indeed, we take note, and in any case, the report of the committee needs to go to the General Assembly, and we will make sure that the discussions are fully reflected in the report that goes to the General Assembly.
So, Algeria.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous n'avons pas de commentaires. Nous sommes au contraire, nous sommes pour la suppression de ces paragraphes-là. Et vous pourrez peut-être dans votre rapport, justement, faire mention des attentes de la Colombie à ce sujet. J'avais juste une remarque sur le paragraphe 11. Je ne crois pas que le paragraphe 11 soit inclus dans la volonté de suppression. Paragraphe 11, je crois qu'il devrait rester parce que nous ne faisons qu'inviter les États parties à verser des contributions volontaires supplémentaires au Fonds du patrimoine. Je pose la question peut-être à la Turquie et aux Philippines, mais je ne pense pas qu'on ait demandé à ce que le paragraphe 11 soit supprimé. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Yeah, before giving the floor to Turkey, if I'm not mistaken, we added a new para 5, and para 5, original 5, becomes para 6. And 7, 8, 9, 10 will be deleted. And upon the proposal by Algeria, the 11, or the para 11 will become para 7. And having said that, I now give the floor to Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think this is not general capacity building activity. It's specifically related to the implementation of the overall results framework. We are not mentioning in a wider framework. So in that regard, I think it should also be deleted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Turkey. And Mr. Tim Curtis?
Yeah, indeed. I think the way it's formulated is indeed a paragraph, the new paragraph 11 is directly related to paragraph 10. And although we are usually inviting countries to support, in this sense, it wouldn't make sense to keep paragraph 11 because paragraph 11 is asking to contribute for the purpose of paragraph 10. So perhaps this needs to be reproduced in a draft decision for the General Assembly. Thank you.
Okay, I now give the floor to Hungary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Indeed, this debate is very fruitful and is already coming, I think, towards the end. We would like to express support for the suggestion made by Turkey and supported by a number of delegations not to rush forward and preempt the decision that the General Assembly may take. Maybe we are saying the obvious, but then perhaps a small phrase after in para 5, could be included in the sense that this committee recommends to the General Assembly to expedite steps towards the implementation of this overall results framework. So what we are saying now in 6 to 9 and even 10 could be in a brief form put there as a suggestion for the General Assembly that not only it adopts the overall results framework, but also makes the necessary steps for its implementation in terms of elaborating guidance notes, etc. Or is this something that would go inevitably into the General Assembly draft recommendation? I'm not sure there, but I would like this overall results framework to be put in place after its adoption by the General Assembly, possible adoption by the General Assembly, as soon as possible. And I would also like to inquire from the Secretary as for the timeline, whether there will still be sufficient time for this to go into the first cycle of periodic reporting that we will envisage later today as regional national reporting, whether there will be enough time after the General Assembly to instrumentalize the tools that are necessary for the PEREP to go along this conceptual framework. And as a last remark, let me also express our support for what Philippines have said concerning the role of this committee. We see the role of this committee as sovereign with regard to the expert group that came together in Chengdu and did this formidable work for which we have expressed great support. But I don't think that the numbers is something that plays here. The fact that there have been 53 member states present and here there are 24, this is not something that decides on who has authority over the other. This committee has been elected by the General Assembly, and while we very much appreciate the work of the working group in Chengdu, this committee has the mandate to approve the results that have been magnificently achieved there. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Hungary. And later I will ask, can you elaborate your proposal in written or written specific language? And now I give the floor to Secretariat.
Thank you. I understand two questions that Hungary proposed to the Secretariat. The first concerns, will things be ready in time in terms of periodic reporting? And I will invite you, we address this in the next document on the change of the operational directives precisely for the reporting cycle, which is why we are proposing some 18-month suspension of periodic reporting. We need time. But as Ambassador Wang informed us, we need to be very careful about time as well. So we propose, we need about 18 months, we estimate. We need about 18 months to, first of all, once it's approved, and we're not starting until it's approved because we can't start until it's approved. Once it's approved, we then start working on the forms and capacity building materials simultaneously. So we estimate about 18 months at least to do that. So there will be 2 committee sessions where no periodic reports will be examined. Because we simply we can't do both at the same time. Either we keep examining new periodic reports, or we stop for a while until we can do the work necessary to adjust to the new system. This will be dealt with in the periodic. This is what the draft amendments are to the operational directives. And when we come to that, I will explain that quite quickly. Those also need to be approved by the General Assembly. As to the mandate of the committee to the working group, you are right. The committee has sovereign mandate, but it's not an expert group that met. It was an intergovernmental working group, who are the same governments that sit on the General Assembly. So while it's not a mandate issue, it does make sense to think that they were there as representatives, since in any way the General Assembly has higher authority than the committee on this matter. So that's why I was speaking in that right. You are correct. The committee is mandated over the intergovernmental working group. But it was a formal intergovernmental working group which was requested by the committee. There, thank
you. Okay, Mr. Secretary, and if there is no specific language text which will be proposed by Hungary, if that's the case, we will get back to original text. Addition of new para 5 and para original 5 becomes 6 and the period there. May I ask the delegation of Algeria, Nassim? Can you comment
sorry,
on this?
Mr. President, I was consulting with my expert. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, we have fully discussed. So with the addition of new para 5 and old para becomes new para 6 and their full period. And you mentioned about that old para 11, you want to keep that para.
We are satisfied by the explanation made by the Secretariat. We are not insisting on keeping para 5. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you so much.
We have a written proposal from Hungary for paragraph 6. Just a minute.
Okay. Yeah, let's wait for a while because the delegation of Hungary just proposed some new language. Okay, the delegation of Hungary added at the last part of that para 6 recommend to the General Assembly to approve the overall research framework as annexed to this decision and to initiate steps for its implementation. Are there any comments? I see none. So para 6 is adopted as amended. Yeah, we have now adopted each of the para, and we need to adopt the decisions as a whole, from para 1 to para 6 as amended. Seeing no objections, I declare decision 12.9 adopted as amended. We move on now to item 10, draft amendments to the operational directives on periodic reporting. As I understand, this item is directly linked with the item on the overall research framework. Mr. Secretary, the floor is yours to present to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. As we have just discussed, the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group in Jeju highlighted the need to reform the periodic reporting process to make it more useful for states parties and for the Convention as a whole, and made a recommendation in this sense to the committee. We all know the existing reporting system has faced a number of challenges, and we spoke about them again this morning, and on several occasions, in fact repeated occasions, this has been called to attention by the committee. It simply has not demonstrated its full potential despite, although we have gathered quite a wealth of information since 2011. The main issues in that respect seem to be, first of all, of course, you all know, the low rate of submission and tardiness with which many reports are submitted. And of course that creates a total unpredictability for us in the Secretariat to know in advance how many reports will have to be treated in a certain cycle. Because of course as the reports come in late, they become cumulative. But from a substance point of view, and this was also outlined in the iOS evaluation, the reports themselves tend to focus only on activities and not really to give us much information about the results and the impacts of activities in terms of ICH safeguarding. And so as was decided under item, as we will propose to the General Assembly, reporting form ICH 10 is intended to be revised in light of the overall results framework. In order to make it easier for states to report on the impact of the 2003 Convention with clear indicators and benchmark. And as I emphasized in my presentation under the previous item, allow me to underline once again that the reporting exercise is not simply an obligation, but hopefully also a useful tool that states parties have to self-assess the implementation of the Convention at the national level, their strengths and weaknesses, and to share with the others the experiences gained and lessons learned. The open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group also recommended that the Secretariat propose to the Committee for its consideration possible changes to the periodic reporting mechanism to move towards a regional cycle of national reporting and prepare draft revisions of the operational directives necessary to that end. The Secretariat's proposal for such revision is to be found in the annex of the document ITH/17/12.com/10. So allow me to clarify also that for the time being, this procedure, the procedure for the urgent safeguarding list reporting will not change because of also in keeping in mind the broader reflections on the future of the list, the transfer and the removal of inscribed elements. the urgent safeguarding list reports remains a separate reporting system on a quadrennial and an inscription year-based schedule. So no revision is proposed for the procedure for states non-party to the Convention reporting on elements inscribed on the representative list, which currently concerns only one country, the Russian Federation. So this will remain a sexennial reporting process based on the year of incorporation of masterpieces on the representative list. So in order to help the implementation of the new reporting system, specific training modules will be prepared. Using this training materials, capacity building activities will be given at the regional level. This will be an opportunity for collaboration at the regional or sub-regional levels to foster dialogue and exchange regarding national experiences. Operationally, the move towards the regional cycle of national reporting requires several steps before the new calendar can be fully put into place. And you will have a graphic on your screen. Okay. So this is a graph of the process of how we're doing it. So let me talk through it. During the 13Com in November 2018, next year, it is proposed that the committee examines for the last time under the existing procedure the reports submitted by the deadline of 15th of December this year. The transition period will last then from the 7GA in June 2018 to the 14Com in November 2019. After the adoption of the overall results framework, the Secretariat proposes to then revise the periodic reporting form ICH 10 and prepare the capacity building materials. The submission of periodic reports on the implementation of the Convention will therefore be suspended for the deadline of 15th December 2018 and 19, including for overdue reports. So during that period, we will not be processing any more reports because we will be working on the new system. The updated form ICH 10 and the new capacity building materials will be presented to the committee at the 14Com in November 2019. The preparation of reports in the first region will then start in early 2020 and last till the submission deadline, which will be the 15th of December 2020. So that's when we hope to do the first round of capacity buildings in a region. The committee will then examine these reports from the first region at the 16Com in November 2021. At the same time, the second region would have started the preparation of reports in early 2021 in order for them to be submitted by 15th of December 2021 and examined by the committee at the 17Com in November 2022, and so on with the other regions until 21Com in 2026. So this is a long transition cycle, and it's a major transition in the Convention. So in this proposal, the regional cycle of national reporting is of 6 years, with 1 year dedicated to each electoral group. The committee will decide the order of examination by electoral groups for each 6-year regional cycle at the beginning of each cycle. Decision for the first regional cycle is to be taken next year during the 13Com. The move towards a regional cycle of national reporting represents the main changes to the operational directives presented in the annex of document 10. Other minor revisions proposed concerns paragraph 152, 161, and 169 to introduce the possibility of submitting reports online, which is already available from this year on an experimental basis for the USL reports. Paragraph 162 on the urgent safeguarding list reports to comply with the request of the committee at its 10th session in 2015 to include the possibility for reporting states to update their safeguarding plans. Paragraph 166, to conform to the existing practice for the publication of reports and its merging with paragraph 167 on the processing of reports. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I now open the floor. Does anybody wish to take the floor? I see Hungary and Turkey. Yeah, first I give the floor to Hungary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. Indeed, we very, very much appreciate this document and the proposal put forward by the Secretariat. We see indeed periodic reporting as a crucial element for the implementation of the Convention. We need to know what happens on the ground, what happens on national level, and what happens at regional level. And I very much welcome the suggestion for a regional, let me be precise, a regional but national periodic reporting, on the understanding that the reports will continue to be national, but the exercise of reporting itself will be done with cooperation in the regions. That is, there will be meetings convened where states parties get together and learn from experience of the implementation of the Convention in other countries. This is the established practice in the World Heritage Convention, and we very much welcome the adoption of this practice in the context of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Convention. There is one clarification I would like to make. The document uses the terms regional and electoral group somewhat interchangeably. These two things don't mean the same. For example, electoral group 1 consists of countries that start from Canada and go down to Turkey and Israel. This is certainly not a region in the geographic sense of the term. In the context of this convention, just as in the context of the World Heritage Convention, we very much favor regional reporting. And the way it was achieved in the context of the World Heritage Convention was actually merging together electoral group 1 and 2. So in the end, we end up with 5 regional groups, which still allows for the 6-year cycles to be done, on the understanding that there's usually one 2-year period of, how do we take that, of recess, of assessing the lessons learned from the cycles that have been carried out. All I'm saying does not have any repercussions on the draft decision that is before us. The draft decision uses the language regional, and we are happy with that. I'm saying only this because we would like to suggest to follow the same model as in the World Heritage Convention of merging electoral group 1 and 2 together. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you so much, Hungary, and very useful difference between the regional group and the electoral group. Yeah, thank you. And I now give the floor to Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, let me first thank the Secretariat for the proposal before us, which we welcome. Periodic reporting is a crucial instrument within the framework of this convention. However, today, periodic reporting does not fulfill its purpose, not only because the rate of submission is low, which hampers the overall monitoring of the convention, but also as the reports are activity-oriented in its current form, they do not enable us to see where we stand in terms of its impact, both at the national and global level. It seems that overall results framework, once it's adopted, will enable us to better monitor the effectiveness of the convention as a whole. We welcome the proposal of revising the reporting process to align it with the results framework approach. However, we believe that this committee is not the one to adopt the proposal. before its adoption by the General Assembly. It will be the next committee's responsibility to consider this issue depending on the decision of the General Assembly. Having said this, as we have also mentioned in our previous intervention, capacity building will be required to adapt results-based reporting, periodic reporting. At a time when preparation of existing reports have already been a challenge and periodic reports have already been overdue for some time, the introduction of this new reporting format will definitely require additional capacity building support for many states parties. Indeed, the voluntary contribution of the Republic of Korea has been very timely to address this issue. We would like to know whether the Secretariat has given some thought in this matter, considering the diminishing extra budgetary funding. On the other hand, we welcome the revision of the periodicity of the periodic reporting towards a regional perspective. Such a change would enable us to have a regional picture of the Convention. The advantage of regional periodic reporting would be to encourage cooperation at the regional level in terms of good practices, capacity building activities, and etc. Accordingly, the Secretariat can elaborate capacity building activities that are in line with the needs of the region. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Turkey. Now, Bulgaria, followed by Austria. After hearing some comments from Bulgaria and Austria, I will give the floor to Secretariat to respond. The first, Bulgaria.
The delegation of Bulgaria welcomes the efforts on behalf of the Secretariat to enhance and improve the procedure of the reporting and would like to express our positive attitude toward the proposed new system and cycle of reporting. We would like to express our appreciation for the thus made proposal, and we consider that in many respects it will help making the reporting procedures and process more efficient. We believe that it will certainly enhance the regional cooperation and dialogue, strengthening the possibilities for joint efforts in the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage and in the implementation of 2003 Convention in particular. We specifically would like to welcome the attention that is being paid on the preparation of concrete training modules and the focus that is paid in the document on training and capacity building activities. In our view, this will truly reach a broader reflection on the future of the safeguarding activities and overall attention that will go beyond national but would address regional levels and joint cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bulgaria. I now invite the distinguished delegates of Austria. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We highly welcome the Secretariat's proposal of this new reporting mechanism as well, which is in line with the overall results framework that we have just approved. And yeah, we also believe that this new way of grouping together reports invites the respective group amongst others, to build up capacity building programs in the context of meetings that might take place every 6 years, and to support and motivate each other in the preparation of the reports, and thereby also improve the overall quality and usefulness of these reports. Another challenge that we still see is the reporting on the list, which will also need a revision in the long run, because at the present state there is no clear mechanism foreseen for the updating of elements inscribed on, well, either the representative list or also the Register of Good Safeguarding Practices. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Austria. Now, Mr. Tinkotis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I can address about 3 different questions. One is related to the regional and electoral group and the model we are following. The second is related to the development of the capacity building and the implementation of it. And the third is about the monitoring or reporting on the listings. Yes, indeed, we looked at the World Heritage Model quite closely. We have proposed, we believe, operational directives that allow the flexibility for that model to be followed, should that be the wish of those electoral groups. We find that it's, in many ways, makes our life easier. So that is perfectly fine, and as you said, this can be established, and we haven't established the order yet of any cycle. So that will be for future committees to do. There will be 6-year cycles if 2 electoral groups wish to be grouped together. That allows us 1 year to prepare for the next cycle's lessons learned, as does in World Heritage, and it seems that the system works quite well in World Heritage, and therefore, why not? It's a good system. Concerning the development of capacity building, this happens as always with capacity building. You are aware that a 20% of the funds are devoted to these other functions of the committee. And as the usual way of doing capacity building, we develop the upstream material. We develop the material for the training through those funding mechanisms, because that is material developed at the global level. And it's the kind of work that is difficult to attract to donor interest. But of course, the actual holding of the trainings and the actual holding of the meetings will depend on mobilizing resource, as always happens with the capacity building. So we intend to follow the normal process of capacity building, but this will define, if you will, our work in the capacity building in that period because there's quite an intense amount of work in terms of developing the materials, the cases, preparing the facilitators to roll out, and then we have to raise the money for the actual implementation of the capacity building, so that is the intention. The questions of the list, I think as the delegate from Austria rightly pointed out, it's important, it's complex. We are trying to, so to speak, bite off manageable sizes of the pie one at a time. We are coming to an agenda item later, agenda item 14, which will start to go into those issues, and it will take some time. But as you can see from the time frame proposed here, just merely changing the periodic report is going to take us quite a long period to get this going. So we believe some of those questions are being addressed under agenda item 14, if I'm not, 14 on the transfer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are there any other comments or questions? I recognize the permanent delegate of Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La Côte d'Ivoire aimerait avoir une explication. Nous avons bien compris qu'il y aura désormais des rapports régionaux, qu'il y aura une période de transition et que ce sera qu'à partir de 2020 qu'il va falloir remettre des rapports. Mais on a noté tout à l'heure qu'il y avait des pays qui avaient énormément de retard dans l'émission de leurs rapports. Qu'est-ce qui va se passer pour eux, puisqu'il y aura une période transitoire pendant laquelle on ne va pas examiner les rapports? Est-ce que vous pouvez m'expliquer? Merci.
Oui, en fait, il y a c'est-à-dire qu'à un moment, il faut appuyer sur le bouton pour refaire un autre cycle. Et ceux qui sont très en retard, donc on va examiner ceux qui sont cette année, mais s'ils sont en retard, ils ne seront plus examinés. C'est-à-dire soit on change le système, on a beaucoup pensé à ça, et c'est pour ça qu'on n'a pas essayé de proposer encore quelles sont les régions par lesquelles on va commencer, par exemple. Parce qu'il faudra prendre un état de lieu de quels sont exactement les pays. Est-ce que ceux qui sont en retard, on les réexaminera toute la première année du nouveau cycle? Mais effectivement, il y a certains pays, soit qui seront juste dus pour le rapport, ou qui auront du retard. Et ceux qui sont en retard, on ne va pas forcément... il faudra peut-être qu'ils attendent la fin de cette suspension pour que les rapports soient examinés. Mais on a réfléchi et c'est pour ça qu'on ne propose pas à ce stade quel est l'ordre des régions. Parce qu'il faudrait qu'on fasse une analyse un peu plus détaillée pour voir quels sont les pays qui sont... parce qu'il y a aussi des pays qui ne sont pas en retard, qui vont devoir attendre. C'est-à-dire ceux qui sont dus. Alors l'estimation, c'est que ceux qui sont à temps aussi, eux, ils ont peut-être la priorité d'être examinés. Mais il sera impossible de changer le système avec le même cycle. C'est-à-dire qu'on ne peut pas gérer et la continuation et la mise en place d'un nouveau système en même temps. Et c'est pour ça qu'effectivement, il y aura des discussions sur certains pays, comment inclure. Il me semble que ceux qui sont en retard, ceux qui sont à l'heure, sont à l'heure, ceux qui sont à l'heure ont raison, plus que ceux qui sont en retard. Il faudra voir tout ça. Alors, est-ce que, par exemple, ceux qui viennent de soumettre l'année d'avant et qui font partie de la première région, est-ce qu'ils sont obligés de resoumettre une année après? Donc, effectivement, nous n'avons pas voulu mettre ces régions parce qu'il faudra faire une discussion basée sur une analyse plus complète de la situation des États qui ont soumis, quelles sont les dates. Parce que je vous rappelle que, comme vous le savez, le règlement est que pour l'instant, c'est tous les 6 ans à partir de la date d'inscription. Ce qui rend impossible d'essayer d'organiser des renforcements de capacité parce qu'au niveau régional, on peut le faire. Donc oui, je comprends que c'est un souci, on ne vous a pas proposé encore une décision là-dessus parce qu'il faudra faire une analyse plus approfondie pour comprendre mieux la situation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. After hearing from the delegation of the Republic of Korea and an observer member Burkina Faso, and I'd like to close the speakers list. And after hearing Republic of Korea and Burkina Faso, I'd like to turn to the draft decision. Now, I'd like to invite the distinguished delegate of Republic of Korea. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Korean delegation believes that the new periodic reporting mechanism will serve as an efficient tool for monitoring the effectiveness of the convention. As a whole, since the periodic reporting assists state parties to examine their achievements and challenges and to define their priority for safeguarding the heritages. However, we are wondering whether the new mechanism will guarantee a higher submission rate of the periodic report. In order to encourage the implementation of the convention, relevant effort and support at national, regional, and global level are required, including cooperation with the regional partners such as C2 Center, facilitator, accredited NGOs, and ICT experts. We also would like to request the Secretariat to clarify whether there are other follow-up measures to promote the submission of a report in taking the new mechanism on regional basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Republic of Korea. Le distingué délégué de Burkina Faso, vous avez la parole.
Ok, merci bien, Monsieur le Président. Alors, je ne sais pas si ma question est sans objet après l'intervention de Monsieur le Secrétaire, justement par rapport à la soumission des rapports. Le Burkina Faso doit, par exemple, soumettre son rapport pour l'année prochaine, en 2018. Avec la période de transition, est-ce qu'il va falloir encore soumettre ce rapport? Merci bien.
So if, yes, it will mean we will keeping them until this year, 2017, and then we'll stop processing them. So next year it's again, but it needs to be approved by the General Assembly, but that is the idea. So we can still receive them, but the committee will examine next year for the last time those reports it received this year, and then it'll have to go on suspension for 2 committees.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. As I informed you, let us move now to the decision. Okay, people. People taking decision, because in the morning session, we didn't respond to the question raised by Republic of Korea, so now it's time to...
I hear the question from the Republic of Korea, which is how to ensure the effectiveness of this. And, I cannot give you a 100% guarantee, of course, about how state parties will fill in their reports. But we can see from the World Heritage Model in particular that this kind of working, say, with our officers, our field officers, in order to organize meetings, bring together the experts of different countries, does produce results. Of course, if Category 2 centers can help us and other partners, we are very welcome. I mean, we welcome them. In terms of other mechanisms, and if it's specifically returning to the online reporting, we will keep working on the online reporting. And then once the new forms are ready, we will bring online the new forms. So one doesn't replace the other. But yes, once we actually have this established, it's quite a job. We will start working, hopefully, with our field officers. We will need to get money, extra budgetary or other, work with the field officers. And in that sense, we can see the experience of World Heritage and follow along that. Perhaps what I will emphasize that given the nature of the overall results framework, we would like to keep the focus on national reports. ICH has its expression at the community level, so if we only do regional reports, I think we are missing a lot. And this was discussed somewhat also in Chengdu. So the idea is that this regional cycle of national reports, but allowing us to group together regions will allow us to give support to the process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dear colleagues, please refer to document 10 and its draft decision in para 17. We can see it on screens. May I ask the committee to adopt draft decision 12.com10 as shown on the screens? Just here, scroll down. Are there any proposed amendments? For the time being, there is none. Are there any proposed amendment for this draft decision shown on screens? I see none. Seeing none, I therefore declare decision 12.com10 adopted as a whole. We start already? Yes. I drove too fast. We now come to examine item 11, a report of the evaluation body on its work in 2017, which will retain our attention for some time. Before starting, I invite the chairperson of the evaluation body, Mr. Ahmed Skunti, representing Morocco, and its rapporteur, Mr. Sasa Srekovic, representing Serbia, to join us at the podium. Squint is there? Okay. I wish to remind you that the committee established the evaluation body at its 11th session in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, in order to evaluate the nominations to the list of intangible cultural heritage in need of urgent safeguarding. The nominations to the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The request for the transfer of an element from the list of intangible cultural heritage in need of urgent safeguarding to the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The request for international assistance greater than $100,000 and the proposals to the Register of Good Safeguarding Practices. Let me explain how we will deal with items of the agenda concerning the report of evaluation body that also includes 5 sub-items. We will begin with item 11, the overall report of the evaluation body on its work, as follows. Mr. Srekovic will present an oral report on a number of cross-cutting and specific issues raised during the body's work on 4 mechanisms, namely the urgent safeguarding list, the representative list, international assistance, and the Register of Good Safeguarding Practices, as well as on the evaluation of a request for the transfer of an element from one list to another. Following the oral report, I will open the floor for specific questions to the evaluation body. I will ask you at that stage to restrict your interventions to questions to the evaluation body concerning issues raised in this report. Our general debate on this item will take place after we have evaluated all individual files, at which point we will move to the adoption of the overall decision 12.com/11. If you have no question on the order of the examination of nomination and the debate, we can proceed to the evaluation of the 6 nominations to the urgent safeguarding list, item 11A. The 34 nominations to the representative list, item 11B. The request for the transfer of an element from one list to another, item 11C. The 2 requests for international assistance greater than $100,000, item 11B. And the 2 proposals to the Register of Good Safeguarding Practices, item 11E. All nominations, requests, and proposals will be the subject of a brief presentation by the chairperson of the evaluation body, who will give us a succinct explanation justifying the draft decisions of the body, along with the display of photographic materials on the screens. Concerning the debate of the committee on the files, I wish to underline that a heavy task is ahead of us with 45 files to be examined over the course of 15 hours. Due to this tight schedule, and in order to allow sufficient time for the committee to discuss specific files, the Bureau, during its meeting on 3rd of October, agreed to adopt the same procedure as in the 2 previous years and to invite committee members wishing to discuss or amend specific draft decisions on nominations to inform the Secretariat by today, 9 a.m. This is merely a matter of organization. I wish to reassure the members of the committee that this procedure does not prevent any committee member from taking the floor on any decision if it so wishes during the current item. In this regard, I informed you yesterday during item 2, adoption of the agenda, that the Bureau decided through an electronic consultation in November 2017 that the debate would be opened on all 9 files for which the evaluation body proposed 2 options. These include the multinational nomination to the urgent safeguarding list submitted by Colombia and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, as well as the nomination to the urgent safeguarding list submitted by Mongolia, and 7 nominations to the representative list, including the multinational file submitted by Bulgaria, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, the Republic of Moldova, and Romania. The nomination files respectively submitted by Cote d'Ivoire, Cuba, Indonesia, Ireland, and Malawi, and a multinational file submitted by the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia and Turkey. In addition, the Secretariat received requests for debate by committee members concerning 2 nominations to the representative list. In principle, we will adopt draft decisions for which amendments were submitted, para by para. For other decisions, we could expect to adopt them as a whole. In either case, the submitting state will have 2 minutes for comments after adoption as customary. I hope that we can, in this way, save time and conduct our discussions in an optimal manner. Concerning nominations that have been recommended for referral, allow me to recall that in conformity with the decision 9.com 13.c in 2014, the evaluation body recommended to refer a file only in the case of information lacking in a nomination, whether it be of a technical or substantial nature. Depending on its own priorities, the submitting state may wish to resubmit the referral file during the immediate following cycle or during another future cycle. This is the reason why each decision for referral states that submitting states are invited to resubmit the nomination to the committee for examination during a following cycle. In any case, files referred and later resubmitted are considered as new nominations and therefore are subject to the overall ceiling of files and the priority system described under para 34 of the operational directives. Another aspect that I want to clarify is how I intend to proceed with amendments to the draft decisions on nominations, in particular in light of decision 11.com 8 we took last year regarding the clarification on the decision-making process concerning inscription, selection, or approval of nominations, proposals, and requests, as well as our debate during the examination of nominations to the list of the convention in 2016. As members of the committee are well aware, our decision-making process has also been the subject of numerous discussions throughout 2017 during the meetings of the informal ad hoc working group established during our 11th session in 2016. While the work of the informal ad hoc working group is ongoing, and its report will in fact be discussed under item 13 of our agenda, it is important for me to acknowledge our debates and the many different ideas that have been discussed. That being said, item 13 will be the opportunity for us to fully debate around these ideas. Since our 11th session last year, we can observe that considerable progress has been made. In its report, document ITH/17/12.com/11, the evaluation body points out that 3 nominations that had been referred by the committee in previous cycles had been significantly improved and are now recommended for inscription in the present cycle. This demonstrates the positive impact of the referral option. Furthermore, the Secretariat has revised the Section 5 of the nomination forms for the urgent safeguarding list, Form ICH-01, and the representative list, Form ICH-02, to reduce the likelihood of nominations being referred due to missing technical information. We will be able to see the impact of these revised forms during our next session in 2018. An even more visible and operational progress this year is the innovative proposal from the evaluation body to use dual option draft decisions for nominations that would be referred only due to missing factual or technical information under criterion 5. Dual option draft decisions have been proposed for 9 nominations, which I believe will facilitate our work this year. Taking into account all these considerations, I'd like to apply the following working method as a way forward for the present examination of nominations, requests, and proposals under item 11. In accordance with the para 14 of the Rules of Procedure of the Committee, my duty as chairperson is the smooth conduct of the proceedings and the maintenance of order. This will constitute my main line of action during our debate. As is reflected in Decision 11.com/8 we adopted last year, the spirit of consensus is the one that should prevail in our debate. I believe it would also be in order to remind ourselves that the draft decisions proposed to us have been prepared by the evaluation body, a consultative body created to assist us in our examination of nominations, because we know that we do have the time to go thoroughly through each nomination file. We elect its members. We even proposed its candidates. Therefore, our debate and our decision-making process shall demonstrate respect towards the expertise and the diligent work of the evaluation body. In conformity with the decision made last year and in the spirit of consensus that prevails in the work of UNESCO's governing bodies, when amendments are put forward, I will seek to establish consensus through appreciating both supporting arguments and objections to those amendments under consideration. This aspect of the conduct of our debate is of prime importance to me. In this regard, allow me to emphasize that our decision-making process has an impact on the credibility of not only the work of the committee, but also by inference for the convention as a whole. It is therefore our duty and our responsibility as members of the committee to keep these considerations in mind throughout our debate. Do you have any comments or questions on the procedure proposed for the examination of the files? No? Okay, thank you. I see none. Dear colleagues, I wish now to recall several other important points about the procedure of our debate, which are the working methods adopted by the committee that I kindly ask you to respect. Once again, during the general debate, priority is given to members of the committee, but I will also give the floor to state parties, non-members of the committee, and other observers if time allows. During the debate on draft decisions concerning specific nominations, proposals, and requests, participation in the debate is limited to committee members. Let me also recall Rule 22.4 of the Rules of Procedure. Submitting states whether or not a member of the committee shall not speak to advocate the inclusion of their file, but only to provide information in reply to questions raised by committee members, if any. I remind members and observers that there are large numbers of people following our work back home through audiocast, videocast, or through the news media. And it is therefore important for us to keep as closely as possible to our schedule. Do you have any questions on the procedure for the debate or the documents? I see none. Allow me now to give the floor to Mr. Srekovic. Please, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. It is my honor to introduce the overall report of the evaluation body on its work in 2017. Our report will cover an overview of this year's files in terms of statistics and quality, our working methods, observations, and recommendations concerning cross-cutting issues, as well as a draft decision for the committee's consideration. Representing equitably all 6 regions, the body was composed of 12 members. 6 of them were individual expert representatives of state parties, non-members of the committee. And those are Mrs. Amelia Maria de Melo Frazao Moreira from Portugal, Mrs. Sonia Montesino Aguirre from Chile, Mrs. Hien Thi Nguyen from Vietnam, Mr. John Mogi Omare from Kenya, Mr. Ahmed Skunti from Morocco, and myself, Sasha Srečković from Serbia. Another 6 persons represented accredited non-governmental organizations: Norwegian Crafts Institute, Czech Ethnological Society, Association of Friends of Brazilian Folk Art, Casa do Pontal Museum, China Folklore Society, Cross-Cultural Foundation of Uganda, Egyptian Society for Folk Traditions. When we met for the first time in March this year, we elected Mr. Ahmed Skunti from Morocco as chairperson and Mrs. Amelia Maria de Melo Frazao Moreira from Portugal as vice chairperson. My colleagues then honored me with the duties of rapporteur. It is my privilege, therefore, to present this consensus and to speak here on behalf of all the 12 members of the body. Dear Mr. Chair, allow me now to outline in brief some of the essential issues, observations, and conclusions that emerged during our deliberation in this cycle. A total of 49 files were completed by the submitting states in time for evaluation by the evaluation body, including the request from Vietnam to transfer an element from the urgent safeguarding list to the representative list above the adopted overall ceiling for the 2017 cycle. So in total, for urgent safeguarding list 6, representative list 35, register of good safeguarding practices 4, international assistance 3, transfer from one list to another 1, in total 49. As regards general observations and recommendations, and in addition to the principles and guidelines already accumulated in the previous cycles and reflected in the aid memoirs and other relevant documents where the jurisprudence of previous experiences of the evaluation bodies is not only recorded, but is being duly implemented in the regular work procedures, we wish to outline both recurrent issues and newly emerging issues. As regards working methods, the evaluation body again encountered a number of files lacking information or evidence related to criterion R5U5. When noting that all of the other criteria in the respective files were met, it regretted those situations in which nomination would be recommended for referral only because of the lack of factual information related to the inclusion of the element in an inventory, so respectively R5U5. Therefore, noting that nomination forms using a revised format for Section 5 will only be used from the 2018 cycle, the evaluation body reached a consensus for those cases and wishes to propose a possible way forward involving a form of dual system of draft decisions with two options. First, to refer the file to the submitting state due to the missing information as per the existing procedure, and two, to allow the state party concerned to provide evidence on the missing information at the committee meeting so that it will not have to wait another 2 years to resubmit the nomination file and have it examined by the committee. The evaluation body underlines that this process should only apply to this cycle and should be limited to U5R5. Overview of files. The evaluation body was pleased to note the continuing trend of high-quality nominations. Its overall impression was that the quality of the files is growing constantly with each new cycle, and it would therefore like to take this opportunity to commend state parties for the work well done. Generally speaking, the evaluation body appreciated the noteworthy diversity of the nominations. These included elements belonging to particular subdomains that had been somewhat underrepresented in the previous cycles, such as traditional games or know-how on managing natural resources. Likewise, some new perspectives have emerged in this cycle, such as nominations in which children are the main practitioners, or practices such as rituals derived from memories associated with recent historic events that had previously mostly been carried out by the heritage mechanisms and institutions other than communities. The files also included practices closely related to specific cultural and natural spaces, phenomena of urban heritage, elements integrating ritual journeys, an increasing number of culinary practices, and other associated aspects. The evaluation body is pleased to be able to recommend some of the nominations to the representative list in this cycle as overall good examples. In addition, 3 files are also recommended for specific aspects such as community participation, the quality of safeguarding measures, and the monitoring of the possible effects of inscription. The evaluation body was pleased to note that 3 nominations that had been referred by the committee in previous cycles, some of which had been referred on several criteria, have been significantly improved and are therefore recommended for inscription in the present cycle. While the referral option was only recently introduced, the body is of the opinion that this positive outcome shows that this option is already showing its benefits. State parties are reminded of the need to use language that adheres to the principles and spirit of the Convention when preparing nominations. They should also be very cautious when making statements about the origins of an element. The evaluation body would again like to highlight certain titles of nomination files that might imply appropriation when the element is shared by different communities and state parties. As regards the role of videos and supporting documentation, they proved to be very helpful thanks to the additional insight they provide. There were cases in which the video showed that the element is widely practiced, thereby removing certain doubts or dilemmas about the status of elements of intangible cultural heritage. As regards thematic issues, in this cycle, the body has expressed concerns about files referring to counterfeiting a practice, as such notions are not relevant to the Convention and are even contrary to it, and may instead refer to issues of intellectual property rights. State parties are reminded that the inscription of an element on one of the lists of the 2003 Convention does not imply that exclusive rights are claimed over that element, nor does it prevent other state parties from doing the same. In this regard, state parties are further reminded that the 2003 Convention does not seek to establish a system of protection based on geographic origin or geographic indication. In one case, the issue of licensing a practice of intangible cultural heritage arose. This issue may be interpreted differently according to the specific context. Under the Convention, it is acceptable if a license serves only as an acknowledgement for the tradition bearers, but not if it is used as a restrictive measure to prevent other practitioners from engaging in the practice of the element. Concerns were also raised regarding measures that may encourage the over-commercialization, such as in some cases with culinary traditions. Elements of intangible heritage are often practiced in different ways, some of which bring commercial benefits, such as tourist programs and performances during festivals. If the audiences of the element are situated outside of the local communities, the element is more likely to be commercialized to a certain degree. It is essential to indicate in the file whether or not the practitioners are salaried employees and in what way the element forms part of an economic process. Likewise, there are cases where specific companies are named, thereby advertising specific products related to the element, which is also not in line with the Convention. In addition, the evaluation body highlighted the need to pay attention to the distinction between traditional games as practices of intangible cultural heritage and the professional sports. The body encountered issues in cases where it was unclear whether women's participation in certain practices of intangible cultural heritage was voluntary. For example, when the purpose of young girls' participation is to find a suitor for marriage, there is an issue around whether the girls agreed to partake of their own free will or whether an element of coercion was involved. While some elements of intangible cultural heritage attribute gender-specific roles without necessarily contributing to gender inequalities, other intangible cultural heritage practices may in fact be seen as reinforcing gender inequalities. Regarding the issue of economic revitalization, the efforts to restore certain traditions for the economic benefit of communities are not necessarily linked to promoting gender equality or empowering women. A project can be successful in economic terms, but may still fail to achieve the empowerment or emancipation of women who are the tradition bearers. It is important to follow up on the real impact of such practices within the community in the long term. State parties should take heed of some of the implications of a practice acquiring greater visibility if it is inscribed. This may apply in particular to good practices in which the economic interest constitutes an important objective, such as in the case of craft workshops. For example, if the labor regulations within the workshops do not grant due rights to workers and practitioners, the visibility of the heritage may convey negative messages. Some intangible cultural heritage practices pose risks to environmental sustainability. This can be due to different factors, such as pollution and the overexploitation of natural resources needed to sustain the element. However, there are cases in which intangible cultural heritage practices promote environmentally friendly measures, such as those that make use of natural energy sources and traditional technologies. The body identified some cases in which state parties had mixed up the 1972 conventions concerning the protection on world cultural and natural heritage and the 2003 convention. These two normative instruments are similar but not identical, and therefore state parties are advised to abstain from designating elements of intangible cultural heritage as world heritage. Specific issues related to criteria for inscription on the lists. There is the question of whether an element can actually be judged to be in need of urgent safeguarding when it has relatively large number of practitioners, when there is a relatively large number of practitioners. At times, the number of bearers is overestimated due to a failure to distinguish between people who are simply aware of an element, its audiences, and those who actively practice it. Compared to last year's examination cycle, fewer files failed to meet the R2 criterion. However, the challenge remains. The evaluation body is aware of the difficulties that people working in the communities or at the regional and local levels have in understanding and expressing how the inscription of an element could increase the visibility of living heritage at international level and raise awareness of ICH in general. The body felt that the formulation of the questions in this section of the nomination form might not be fully adequate. The body discussed ways forward and identified a few possible directions. One option would be to divide the questions on the form into sub-questions, while another option could be to provide separate boxes in which to place the answers. It was also proposed that state parties be requested to provide information on concrete cases that could illustrate the statements provided on the form, which by themselves are mostly rhetorical and overly abstract. There was a discussion over whether generic threats can be considered to be sufficient to identify if an element is in need of urgent safeguarding and if targeted safeguarding actions can feasibly be undertaken in response. Ideally, these threats should be as specific to the element as possible. It is also difficult to assess whether threats are generic or specific, since they are often interconnected within a given context. In addition, the body mentioned the need to be able to determine the severity of threats within specific contexts. If the threats identified are too generic, it is not possible to assess the appropriateness of the safeguarding plan. Even large-scale threats have targeted and concrete socio-economic consequences, but the safeguarding plan cannot be expected to address them in all their aspects. There needs to be a precise correspondence between the factors threatening the viability of the elements identified in U2 and the safeguarding plan proposed in U3. Occasionally, there was some confusion over the difference between safeguarding measures as required under R3 and the safeguarding plan required under U3. It is necessary to distinguish between the two. The latter needs to be precisely formulated and articulated as a whole. It should identify the objectives, activities, expected results, detailed budget, and responsible bodies. A detailed budget and plan are not required for safeguarding measures as they are for criterion U3. The evaluation body noted that some safeguarding measures are led entirely by governmental bodies. In some cases, such an approach is useful at particular stages of implementation. However, states should ensure that communities are involved to the largest extent possible so that they can work proactively on and take a leading role in carrying out safeguarding measures. For some files, the body encountered difficulties in distinguishing between ongoing safeguarding measures and thus completed in the past, those recently implemented, and those planned for in the future. It would therefore like to invite state parties to ensure that the period of implementation of proposed safeguarding measures is made clear in nomination files. The body also stressed the importance of the actions proposed being specific and connected with the groups and individuals concerned, rather than of a more general nature. The objectives and expected results need to be clearly laid out so that the outcomes can be matched against the initial projections. It is important to determine the representativeness of those who expressed their consent for a nomination. It is one of the requirements set out in the form that there be a justification for the selection of community representatives. This consideration appears not to have been given due attention in recent years. Future bodies should therefore be reminded of the need to enforce a systematic approach to selecting the representatives involved in the nomination process. State parties should be encouraged not to send standardized consent letters. It is important to ensure that the forms of consent are as varied as possible, including various forms of media. Petition forms supporting the nomination are not acceptable. In some cases, there is a lack of clarity as to whether or not those who have expressed their consent have actually understood what safeguarding intangible cultural heritage involves, especially given the use of standardized letters of consent. Equally, communities do not seem to have been properly informed of the difference between a nomination to a list of 2003 convention and the proposal to the Register of Good Safeguarding Practices. There are specific issues related to criteria for selection to the Register of Good Safeguarding Practices. Like, for instance, concerning the proposals for the Register of Good Safeguarding Practices, we would like to stress that close attention needs to be paid to elements and practices connected with wars, armies, and this is always a highly sensitive issue. The specific historical background needs to be taken into account. On the other hand, the evaluation body is concerned that in the future, it may be asked to examine practices that could be seen as supporting a specific political agenda. Another set of questions concerns the issue of whether or not such programs contribute to the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage. Likewise, can this type of commemoration be relevant to other contexts where peace is fragile? Links between peace and sustainable development are particularly important in that regard. Similarly to previous cycles, criterion P9 was the subject of considerable discussion within the body. How can the proposal in question be replicated in developing countries as a model? This question raised a lively discussion among the body since the circumstances in particular countries are often quite specific, thereby impeding efforts to apply safeguarding models from elsewhere. Does it make sense to formulate the criterion in this way? There is a need for good models for safeguarding practices in both developed and developing countries. And some issues related to the transfer of an element from one list to another. For the first time, the evaluation body encountered a case in which a state party wished to first remove an element from a list, in this case the urgent safeguarding list, and two, transfer the same element onto another list, the representative list in this case. The evaluation body first evaluated the report on the status of the element inscribed on the urgent safeguarding list to assess whether the element could be removed from this list. As the format of the report on the status of the element does not employ the same sequence as the criteria for inscription on the urgent safeguarding list, the evaluation body considered the information contained in the report on the status of the element to be insufficient as a whole to ascertain whether the element is still in need of urgent safeguarding. As a second step, the body evaluated the nomination file submitted by Vietnam for an inscription of the element on the representative list, criterion by criterion. As decided by the committee, the evaluation body carried out the process on an experimental basis and subsequently identified the lessons learned. The body considered that submitting states should have to provide proof of the consent of the communities concerned for the requests related to the removal of an element from one list and transfer to another. Concerning the removal of an element from urgent safeguarding list, the body was asked to draw conclusions and offer an informed recommendation based on the periodic report on the safeguarding of the element to which the state party had committed itself when the element had been inscribed on the urgent safeguarding list. Without sufficient evidence, the evaluation body is necessarily basing its evaluation on trust alone. Based on this experience, the body recommends that a new dedicated form be developed specifically for the removal of elements inscribed on the urgent safeguarding list. Furthermore, the evaluation body noticed that the state party decided to request the removal of the element from one list and its transfer onto another before the safeguarding plan had been fully implemented. It was due to be completed only in 2020 in this case. The removal or transfer process needs to be carried out using an established order of activities and with an appropriate procedure, since neither the available forms nor the operational directives provided an adequate mechanism for dealing with the transfer case in question. It is also important to note that the removal of an element from one list does not necessarily entail its transfer onto another. Indeed, should it necessarily be a transfer to the representative list, given that a successful safeguarding process could in fact make it a case for a transfer to the Register of Good Safeguarding Practices. This case also raised the question of how long an element under threat can stay on the urgent safeguarding list, which needs to be considered so that the effects of inscription on the list can be assessed and ascertained. This in turn once again raises the question of the very purpose of this urgent safeguarding list. Specific issues related to international assistance. The evaluation body specifically wishes to draw the committee's attention to requests pertaining to safeguarding activities to be implemented by universities, as this constitutes a relatively new approach to safeguarding projects. It would like to stress that the primary focus of such projects should be on safeguarding activities carried out in close collaboration with the bearer communities themselves, rather than exclusively on research and teaching activities. The evaluation body underscored the need to monitor the implementation of international assistance granted to state parties. The body also stressed the importance of following up on the future development and sustainability of projects after their formal termination, given the importance of assessing the impact and effects of such projects in the long term. Let me use this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to the colleagues from the evaluation body and the Secretariat. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson and members of the committee, for your kind attention.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Srekovic, for your kind presentation. You raised important issues which should inform the debate of the committee. I now open the list of speakers for questions on the report of the evaluation body. Are there any? Firstly, I'd like to take some of the questions by members of the committee. Turkey. Turkey, Austria, Senegal, Okay, on my list, Turkey, Austria, Senegal, Cyprus. And to save the time, I'd like to take any questions from the observer missions. Yeah, in case, please raise your nameplate. I see none. Okay, if that's the case, I'd like to give the floor. Okay, so point of order raised by Hungary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And the point of order I wish to raise is what is the time frame we are working on tonight? How long do you wish to carry on with the meeting tonight? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. We asked the interpreters to stay here until 5:40, so we have 10 minutes. So you have to be allocated 2 minutes or 3 minutes maximum. Having said this, I'd like to give the floor to Turkey first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I don't have questions specifically, but I have comments with regard to the report of the evaluation body. Let me first thank the members of the evaluation body for their extensive work. We would like to acknowledge with appreciation the tremendous amount of work undertaken by the evaluation body. And we welcome the comprehensive report, which covers many important observations and recommendations. To us, it is a report that all states parties should take into consideration in the preparation and submission of their nomination files. We also appreciate the support of the Secretariat for the smooth work of the evaluation body. And when we go through the findings, we welcome many of them. To begin with, we have found the dual system approach very innovative, giving a chance for those files who only have lack of some factual information on the way to inscription. So we thank you for that. We would like to highlight some of the observations which we believe it's critical to our work. For instance, we fully agree with the observation that as some of the elements are shared by different communities, we should refrain from inscribing our elements to the list to authenticate the practice of an element. Certain elements are not restricted to one specific country. We concur with the observation that the use of adjectives of nationality, which may reflect national ownership in the files, is against the ideals and objectives of this convention. In the meantime, when examining the nomination files, we invite the evaluation body to pay attention to the geographical coverage of the nominated element as requested in section D of the files that requires clarification on the geographic location and range of the element, and examine this section in detail and with a comprehensive approach, and once identified by the evaluation body for those files as such, we expect from the body to reflect it on its decisions properly. We also encourage state parties to utilize mechanisms of the convention that encourage multinational nomination files. In this respect, we will have some amendment proposals to the general decision under this agenda item. As pointed out by the evaluation body, we also observe a confusion between the 1972 and 2003 conventions. We have to bear in mind that they are not identical, and we need to understand how these two conventions differ from each other. Maybe a comparative study could be useful to be prepared by the two secretariats to make the distinction clear. We appreciate the recommendations regarding the removal and transfer process, and we should take them into account into our future deliberations. There are many other observations which need the attention of the committee. We encourage all states parties to study the observations of the evaluation body carefully before submitting nominations. With regard to the format of the report itself, according to us, the way the report has been formulated is confusing. Some observations have recommendations, while some others do not have. It needs some adjustment. For instance, paragraph 18 includes a recommendation recommendation, but not clearly put forward. The only explicit recommendation of the body is under paragraph 57, which is about the removal and transfer process. Accordingly, the draft decision reflects partially of what the evaluation body has recommended or observed. It might be very useful if the report of the format, if the reporting format of the evaluation body is simplified and be clear in terms of its recommendations. We invite the evaluation body, together with the Secretariat, to consider its reporting format with a view to making it more user-friendly and for decision makers. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Turkey. We are running out of time, so once again, we have 3 more speakers. Please respect the 2 minutes. We cannot. Yeah, interpretation service, we have to stop here. So tomorrow morning, we will continue. Austria, Senegal, Cyprus, Hungary, and Cuba. And tomorrow morning, anyway, tomorrow morning, we will ask some Colombia. Yeah, keep the list, and tomorrow morning, we will rewrite the speakers list. Okay, thank you so much. Please, ladies and gentlemen, before closing, let me remind you that tomorrow morning the Bureau will meet again at 9 a.m. in the Hala Hall on the 3rd floor to continue with this work. The vice chairpersons from Bulgaria, Colombia, Cote d'Ivoire, Palestine, and Turkey, as well as our rapporteur, Mr. Gabosos, please be there on time so we can begin promptly. I will now pass the floor to the Secretary for a few practical announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I would like to remind the states who wish to hold performances or present audiovisual material after the examination of their nomination files to please inform the Secretariat as soon as possible in order to facilitate its preparation. I also draw to your attention that the Heritage Alive group of the ICH NGO Forum will hold a symposium on traditional medicine in Samda Hall on the 3rd floor at 6:30 p.m. this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. With that said, I declare today's meeting adjourned.